Welcome to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, here to share some amazing conversations. We're talking business, health, making and saving money, or starting something epic. Think of this as your go-to spot for stories that do a lot more than just kill time. They spark ideas, give you a boost, and perhaps even change the way you look at the world. I'm pulling in the experts, the thinkers, the doers, and the dreamers. We're about to dive into stories that open doors and ideas that light up your brain. Here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me today is my guest, Bonnie Garvin. How are you today, Bonnie?
I'm good. Sunny in California. I really can't complain.
Excellent. Yes, and I'm so honored to have you on the show. I've been looking forward to our conversation. And just to share a little bit about you, Bonnie, you are an award-winning writer, a producer, a USC screenwriting professor. You're also a painter and the creator and executive director of Storytelling Lab. And you're going to share all of this with us today. And I can't wait for the listeners to hear more. Bonnie, I always love to have my guests share how this journey happened for them, like what led you down this path. So take it away.
Okay. So, had anyone ever said to me that you're going to be a writer or even suggested it in passing, I would have never taken it seriously. I mean, it never crossed my mind ever. As a matter of fact, if someone, as I say, had suggested it, I would have said no way. But I had been working at a theater doing PR and advertising, a big theater. And although I really liked it, I knew it wasn't something I wanted to do my whole life, but I had no idea what I did want to do. So at the time I was in therapy, and this was one of the things I was wrestling with, like, what am I going to do with my life? And what I decided was to go back to school. So I've already, long graduated. I'd go back to school and just take classes that seemed interesting to me. And in those days, and even now, like when I teach at USC, the class that when you look at on the line, it says it's this, it's not that. And they were always like that. They never really matched the description. So I thought that I was going into a journalism class because I had earlier been for a while in radio broadcasting. Thought, well, maybe I'll think about that. And I went what I thought was a journalism class. And it turned out to be an advanced playwriting class. And I hadn't ever even had a fantasy about writing a play. I hadn't even seen that many plays. I mean, I lived in Detroit. I saw plays, but not like I grew up on the theater. So I went up to the professor afterwards and I said, I'm here by mistake. And I don't think I'm not going to come back next week. I mean, all these people had been writing plays and some had stuff produced locally. And I was the only one that had zero experience. And she said to me, well, it can't hurt you to stay. Why don't you just stay and see what happens? It's only 12 weeks or whatever it was. And I agreed because this is why I was in therapy, because I was a people pleaser. And now I was doing exactly what I'm spending money not to do. So she had said the first assignment was to write a scene. And I thought, I don't even know what a scene is, really. But the one thing I thought about was, well, I know how people talk. So I know that somehow in the scene that there's going to be conversation. So I did the scene, and then that scene ended up to be the last scene in the play I wrote. And every week we bring our work in, and every week people wanted to hear mine. So it was really, really fun. And then the class was over and I felt really good about it. But still, I had no idea what any of that meant. And my professor asked me to have a meeting with her, and I did. And she suggested that I enter it in the Eugene O'Neill Playwrights Competition. Again, something I'd never heard of. So it's so, when you have nothing to lose, it's amazing what you'll do, right? And as soon as you become conscious of it, that's the end. So again, with no expectation, I sent it in, and then I ended up being a finalist. And I thought, oh my God, this was meant to be. I'm going to be a writer, having no idea really like what was involved. But again, the best thing is not knowing, is not going down the road of expectation, but kind of keeping it in the moment. Because once I started having a career as a writer, all my expectations came with it. And that's the bad part, because expectations rarely can they be met because, with some fantasy you've had in your head, what could be better than the fantasy? So that's how I got started.
Oh my gosh, Bonnie, thank you so much for sharing that.
Sure.
I love that so much because it's like those happy accidents, right?
Yes.
You enrolled in this class thinking it was one thing, it turned out to be something entirely different, but look what it launched, right? Like your entire new future in playwriting. So that's so cool. And you're absolutely right. I agree with you on expectations. I think expectations are the killer.
They
When
really are. They really
Yeah.
are. I have a friend who's a very successful novelist, and she lives in England, and she's always teasing me. She'd say, "If you just did what I did," because she says, "I set the lowest expectations, so I'm always happy and never disappointed." And she said, yours are too high." And it's really true. I just get so over the top with as my husband will always say, you're already picking out the dress for the Academy Awards, but you haven't written the story. It's like that.
But, there's something to be said for that dream, though, right? It can be kind of the key to fulfilling that. It's sort of the idea of
Absolutely.
these affirmations, these future thinking thoughts that sort of draw you into it. And I know there's so many people that say we've got to have that as well, that dream, that idea that we can grow into.
Yeah.
But sometimes they can be the thing that stop us in our tracks. And so, that's a fair point as well. But I wanna talk to you a little bit about how you can make a living as a writer, because I know that this just was, like I said, happy accident. It sort of
Right.
came to be from an entirely different, thought process. But what are your thoughts on how you can make this something that is a career that you can actually make a living at?
So I think the first thing is that you have to do it and you want to do it because that's where it's coming from. I always say in my classes that you're the first line of entertainment. So if you're not happy doing it, nobody's going to be happy reading it or whatever. I mean, why would they? So it starts with you and your enthusiasm. But the problem is you have no idea whether it's the best book or whatever it is that people are going to respond. I had a friend who had won all kinds of awards as a nonfiction writer. And then he wrote a novel. He spent 10 years researching it. It took place in France, and he was constantly going back and forth to France, did an unbelievable amount of research. The book comes out. Your mother couldn't have written nicer reviews. I mean, every review was incredible. And he probably sold 3 copies of the book. So, of course, now he's feeling like you can't win. So it's got to be because once you're done, you have absolutely no control over it whatsoever. I had a movie coming out that I worked 10 years on, and when it was supposed to have its premiere in New York, the day before 9/11 happened. So I spent 10 years and the whole thing went away. But that's why I say nothing is in your control. So you have to want to do it and enjoy the process of doing it, because from then on, that's it. So it has to start there. And the other thing I think that's important is that, particularly for women, women make no space for themselves. They have a family, they have work, they have all these responsibilities and never feel like it's okay to, go into a room for an hour and ignore everybody else and do something. So I think it's particularly important for women to have some space that's all about them. And I think that's what taking a class can do, whether it's my class, an art class, a music class, it doesn't really matter what that thing is. It's you're exploring yourself to see what kind of really clicks with you. So it's what I've really learned, and it's taken me a long time. So this is the important thing to share with people. It's got to be about the process. It can't be about the result because you have absolutely no control over the result. So you have to accept the process and enjoy the process. So that's sort of my experience. And I know this from working with students and be doing this a long, long time. And it's interesting because I started painting after reading the book Just Kids by Patti Smith. If you haven't read that book, her memoir, I recommend it to everyone. And I was feeling really kind of down felt like I hit a wall in terms of my writing. And I happened to be staying at a friend's in the Catskills, and they had a Patti Smith book, and I started reading it. And when I was done with it, I was just completely excited about doing something I'd never done before. because she and Robert Mapplethorpe wrote about their relationship, and he became this world famous photographer and she became Pat Smith. So they would, like, after work, they'd have some shitty job, and then they'd be standing in the subway station and they'd find a bottle cap on the floor, and they would go home and turn it into something artistic. I mean, they just for the joy of doing it. And I thought, I want something like that. I want something that has no expectation. So I went down all the things I could do this, I could do this. And then I settled on painting because I'd never had an art class. And I had no expectation. So I went into the class, and although the first thing I did was it was like a 5-year-old did. I mean, it really was. But the thing was, it was kind of fun. So what I found myself doing, I would go home and have a sketch pad, and I got into draw a finger. How do I draw this? So I just got into it, and I really never thought about, will I have a gallery show? Will I be the, and it was the first time I ever did anything with no expectation and just focusing on how much I was enjoying it. And one day my niece is a lawyer, we were talking about this, and it was early on, and she said to me, if you had an Etsy account, you could write on your taxes. She knew it could get me. I was like, okay, but at 5 o'clock that day, I had an Etsy account. And then I started selling things, which is a total shock to me. And once I did that, then I got right back into what I did as a writer. What do people want? What do they like? What sells? And I went through that whole period and then came out thinking, this is insane. You can't do this. You just have to do it because you like it. And I'm back to that. And I'm so much happier, rather feeling like I also have to merchandise it. So if somebody sees it and they want to buy it, great. If not, okay too. So I really feel like I'm doing it for me. Like tomorrow's my art class. I can't wait to go there. It feels like a place I don't have an expectation, and I can just really get into it.
Bonnie, great, great advice in there for sure. I love the idea. It's kind of like you've got to focus on the effort, not the outcome, right? Because we cannot control the outcome, whether it's writing, whether it's painting, whether it's whatever it may be. Yeah, it absolutely doesn't matter. You've got to focus on the effort. And the point that you made about trying to feed into whatever the consumer wants versus what it is that you want to create.
Yeah.
And the difference there, right? Because you can absolutely find joy in what you're wanting to create versus it would feel like a slog if you're trying to create something that you think people might like, right?
No, exactly. I mean, you just have to follow your own instincts, and also the thing that brings you really joy. And that's the best way to achieve anything. It really is. And I think that people need to be, willing to take a chance. I mean, what difference does it make? Go take a class. If you don't like it, don't do it anymore. It's not like, if you just give yourself some permission to have some outlet, it's got nothing to do with work. I also think, going back to the thing with women, I mean, I had a really difficult mother. But the one thing that she really gave me was an example for what to do as an adult. So while all the other mothers were home playing cards and stuff, my mother built a business from scratch. She was an interior designer. And I took so much pride in her doing that because she wasn't like the other mothers. And I thought, this is the kind of life I want to lead. I don't want to be home all day with my kids and then end up when they're at school playing cards. And I think that when people do things like that, whether you end up a success or not, it really says to your children, I'm not just your mother. And I think that your children end up having so much respect for you for that. Maybe not in the short run, because, of course, they want you all the time. But in the long run, I think it really makes a difference and gives them, particularly daughters, a way to go out in the world and feel like that's okay. They get to do that. So I really, really, really try and urge people to make whatever little space it is that's not in your house, that, or a Zoom thing you can do. But I mean, something that's about you, and you're going to have much more to give to your family or to your job outside or whatever it is.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And you've said it now a number of times. It's that you've got to have something for yourself because it's what fills you up, right? That creativity or that time to journal create art, write, whatever it is, it gives you a sense of remaining you as who
Yeah.
you are
Yeah.
and not
Exactly.
just a mother or a wife or a worker,
Yeah.
whatever, some other role. It keeps you grounded in who you are so you don't
It's
forget that
really
either.
true.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
there's even people who haven't done that. Then when they get to an age where their kids are grown, they're kind of lost. And it's not a good thing. I mean, particularly as you get older, because already the society is looking down on you because you're getting older. You don't want to fall into that, and you don't fall into that when you have something that's yours. And the other thing I wanted to say about that before I forget is that something that you said reminded me. People also get into, well, what can I write about? Everything's been written, everything's been said, and you're 100% true. You are not going to reinvent the wheel. But the one thing we haven't heard from is you. So that's what you're bringing to the table. You're not trying to be somebody else. This is a place where you get to solely be you and feel like you're contributing something because it's true. Nobody's heard from you. What do you have to say on this subject?
Yes, I agree 100% on that as well, Bonnie. It's so true. And I've said it in other podcasts. You think about coaches, right? How many coaches are there for fitness, dieting, whatever the case is? But each person is coming at it from a different perspective, right? And
Sure.
so the way that they're going to be sharing information is going to be entirely different than somebody else. And that person may be a match for somebody else, whereas
Yeah,
they may not be a match for this person. And so
exactly.
it just proves your point. Like the stories that we have to share are unique to us. The way that we're going to say it is going to be different than everybody else.
Yeah. And it's great because most of the time we walk around thinking we've got to be like someone else. And it's so liberating to know you don't have to be someone else. You just get to be you. And as I say, I think that that's a really hard thing to do in our society because we're wearing so many different hats. And this is the one you don't. I mean, it's really kind of an amazing thing when you just have something for you because we're so. I think that one of the good parts of COVID was once it got people out of the rat race, they started going, well, wait a minute. This is my life, just going to work and coming home, because that is what most people's lives are. And I think it really woke up a lot of people to make a change.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It was a complete shift in perspective for a lot of people. As devastating as it was for many, it really opened our eyes to new possibilities and new ways of doing things that we didn't have before,
Right.
that were created and came out of that. So yeah, I totally agree. Can we talk a little bit about how an idea is commercial, quote unquote commercial? And I think that's like commercially viable. How can we take this idea or story or thing that we've created and make it commercial?
Well, one of the things I'll say about commercial problem with that and that kind of thinking is, and the best example is in the movie business. So, you go in and everybody's doing X kind of, everybody was like the time of romantic comedies. Okay. Now everybody's writing romantic comedies. By the time you're done with your romantic comedy's over because they've moved on to something else. So you can never tell, number one, what's going to be in vogue by the time you're done. And you have no idea in terms of what's ultimately commercial because I could name, so many books and so many movies that everybody thought, oh, this will never sell. And yet they became bestsellers or, they became successful films and nobody had any faith in them. I remember a wonderful story is with Seinfeld. So when Seinfeld first came out, the first season, nobody watched it, nobody cared. And then they kind of revamped it. I don't, in those days, whereas now they would not do this, but in those days, they would sign you for a season. Like now they will not do that. Now they will only give you the pilot. And if the pilot does well, they'll go on. But they didn't, in the old days, they would just let you go. They revamped the show and then it became Seinfeld. I mean, this was something that nobody believed in. The network had it been now, they'd have pulled the plug. So you have no idea what's going to resonate with people. And I think that, again, it goes back to if you resonate with it, that's the best chance that you have. Because, as I say, what's commercial, what's going to sell, nobody knows. Everybody thinks they know, but they really have no idea. it's like you don't know what external circumstances are going to be in the world and how, effect that has on people and all of that kind of thing. Recently, I don't know if you saw the mini series called Adolescence. So people are talking about it literally all over the world. And it was done in Britain, but it's something that's really crossed over and crossed over really fast. I mean, it would have been something if you said to me, this is going to be on and it's about this, I would think 4 people would watch it. I'd be one of them, but the 3 other people I knew. And yet it's been this phenomenon. And there've been newspapers articles about it. People are doing interviews about it. It's had this profound effect. And yet the only reason it got made was because the writer and one of the actors, a man by the name of Stephen Graham, was a wonderful British actor. And he had developed himself into a successful actor and was sort of building on that and then did this. And because he had a little buzz before that, I think, then they thought, okay, we'll put it on Netflix, not just in England. And immediately it just went through the roof. And it's a really heavy, serious drama that's so unlike what people normally watch. And it's just gone through the roof. And it started literally an international dialogue. Never in a million years would I have expected that. And I don't think anyone would have expected it. So that's the thing about not knowing what resonates with people. Nobody can guess that. Yeah, it goes back to, does it resonate with you? Yeah. If it does, then you're going to have something to say about it. You're going to bring that to the table. And then that's what's new about it.
Yeah, great. Thank you for reiterating that. I mean, again, it just goes back to, what do you have to say? What do you have that's inside you that has to come out, whether it's art, in terms of painting, drawing, whatever, if it's writing, doesn't matter what it is. If it's important to you and you have got to get it out, that's what's important. And then you'll just have to wait and see what happens from there. So let me ask you then, if you're like, for the person who's listening, if they're thinking, how do I tap into my creativity? What are some tips that you can share for that person who's thinking, how do I even begin to discover, what I've got to share?
Well, and it happens. This is a perfect intro. But the other thing I wanted to talk about was, so during COVID, I created a class called Storytelling Lab. And I did it 6 weeks and 6 people. And I thought the COVID would be over in 6 weeks. So, and I've been teaching online my students at USD, and it was a nightmare. I mean, I absolutely hated it. And I thought, if this goes on, I won't continue teaching. I just can't do it. I thought, well, what would I like to do? Because again, it goes back to, if I like doing it, more likely that people would enjoy the class. So because I didn't want to, quote unquote, teach writing, I came up with something different, because I really believe that we're capable of so much more, but we don't try things. So the whole class was built on the idea of every week you would do something completely different than you did the week before. So you either watch something or read something that I give you, and then there's a prompt that ties into it thematically. And because people were exposed to different things, as opposed to, okay, this is writing and I'm giving you notes. There are no notes. No feedback. People will comment, but no rewriting, none of that. What I want to do is find what speaks to you and what's going on in your unconscious, and by tapping into different aspects of it. So my poster child is a woman who'd come into class, and she'd been trying for a long time to write a memoir. And she had this really horrible story, which was she had a stillborn birth, her first kid. And then several years later, her husband, was 42 years old, left for work and never came home because he had a brain aneurysm. So that is all pretty heavy. And over the 6 weeks, I do this assignment for everybody at the end, which is to first you read something that's called Persepolis. And it's an amazing book that is a graphic novel. And it's a graphic novel about the Iranian Revolution. Now, who's going to read that, right? But given the nature of how she told it, it became this international phenomenon. They made a film about it. So when we did this assignment after the class was over, because this was end of the 6 weeks, one of the students, the woman whose husband had that experience, said, I'm going to try writing this as a graphic novel. Now, she'd never drawn anything before, and it's taken her 2 years. She's done all of the drawings herself, having never drawn anything. And not only did there was a big story about her in the Sunday magazine, London Times, and now she has a major agent trying to get it published for her. So she's the perfect example of she did it for herself. And interestingly enough, through my agent in England, he got it to a major, major publisher of graphic novels because there's not a lot around. And they were really interested in it. And they said, well, we'll publish it, but we have to have a professional graphic artist. And if it were me, I'd probably would, yes, do it. Because you know what she said? No, it's mine. I don't care. I want to do it. I mean, if, as I say, me and someone offered to publish something, I'd think, do whatever you want with it. But she didn't feel that way. She really felt like it was her. She was doing it for herself. And now, because she didn't have that expectation, she's had this unbelievable response. And I think that was the whole point of my class, was to open you up to things that you never thought you could do because you'd already made this decision ahead. That doesn't mean you might do it well and still not want to do it, but it opens you up to other possibilities. I have someone that spent a month at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival because she's a singer and so original. I'd never heard anybody like her. She writes all her own music. She plays, and it's very funny and ironical. It's not like what you imagine a show would be. And I mean, she's really built on that. As I said, she's now got a major agent because you've got to be willing to try. I mean, what's the worst going to happen? It's not like you're going to fail something. You're just not going to like it. So what? There's a lot of things you don't like. You try them. In a restaurant, you try something, right? You like it or don't. But you have to kind of feel that way about whatever you're doing. And, you know, I really recommend people take classes. I mean, my class, another class, a dancing class, it doesn't matter. Because if you're doing it for you, then that's the outcome of it. That's the reward. You know, that's my big push for people taking classes. I mean, and I'm not taking classes, if you know, from the start, I would have never started writing. And I've taken a lot of classes since then, not just art classes, because it's fun. I mean, what's the harm in that?
Great stuff, Bonnie. Thank you for sharing that, the story of your student. And I mean, actually a couple students. So great suggestions there for people to try something different. And I love that idea because anytime you're doing something, you're reading something, you're trying something that's different, it just opens you up in a new way. And I feel like it just lights up different parts of your brain, right?
Oh.
And so, yeah. And so you want to be creative, try something new, read something different, try a dance class, take a class at a junior college, whatever, just so that it opens you up to new experiences and opportunities. So I absolutely love that. If you would share with us, what is your greatest fear about writing?
Someone won't like it. It's always that. It's so hard to get out of, will someone like it? And I think that's really it for everybody. That, and the other thing that's hard is to remember that, we always think everybody is thinking about us, nobody's going to like it, nobody this. And then I read this quote by Denzel Washington, and he said, don't worry about what people think about you because they're not thinking about you. And it really is true. We're projecting onto everyone that this one's going to like this or they won't like this. They're not thinking about you. They're worrying about themselves. So you have to think about you and not try and project what other people are going to think about you.
Yeah, great stuff, Bonnie, for sure. Thank you for sharing that with us. I absolutely agree. I mean, we are the center of our own universe, right? So we think that everybody is thinking about what we're doing when really everybody's thinking about what they're doing and worrying about their own lives. Yeah.
One of the exercises I do in my storytelling lab is to make that point is I'll have people write something if they'll say there's an argument, I want you to write it not from your point of view, but the other person's point of view. And it's such an amazing thing because we just assume everyone's having the same experience. And in the memoir Educated, I don't know if you read it or not. It's an amazing memoir. And I'm not a big memoir reader, so I probably read like 8 memoirs in my life. And this one was extraordinary. And one of the things that I loved about it, at the end, she came from this big, fucked up family. And she really was the one that kind of, got out of it, kind of rose to higher heights where they all were like really back there still. And what she said was that she knew when other people in the family would see it, they would have something different to say about it. And one of the brilliant things that she said was everybody is having their own experience. The fact that her brothers or sisters didn't experience that way doesn't take away her experience. Everybody is entitled to their own experience in a situation. No one else has to agree with you because you're not doing it for them. And I had a student in my storytelling lab class who had done an assignment, and then it was something about her family. And she shared it with her sister. And her sister went nuts. This never happened. I don't remember it that way. And you really have to own your own thing. She doesn't have to have experience because she's a different person. I mean, everything that she's experienced, you may have the same parent, but you're not reacting the same way. So it's important to remember that you don't need people to affirm your experience. And that goes back to that Denzel Washington quote. We want everyone to agree, everyone to have seen it that way. But they didn't, and they won't. So if you're comfortable with what happened, with your own vision of it, that you don't have to please anybody else. You've pleased yourself, and that's the only thing that matters.
Yeah. Fabulous, Bonnie. I love that. And it's so true. And I've had conversations with my younger sister, talking about different things that had happened. And she's like, I don't remember that.
Right.
There's, almost 3 years difference between us. So, age difference at the time the experience occurred plays into it as well. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah, you're right. It doesn't matter if their experience is different. You're talking about your experience, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And everybody is having their own experience. I mean, that's, I always say, like, if an airplane crashed into my classroom, everybody would be having the same experience that a plane crashed in. But how everyone's going to relate to that incident is going to be different. Somebody might never walk into a classroom again. Somebody might sue the school. Somebody else would, because that's the nature of us, the beauty of being individuals.
Yeah, great point for sure. And, somebody may never get on an airplane again,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everyone's
Yeah.
having their own reaction. And that's also what makes it interesting, because if we all thought exactly the same thing, all wanted to watch exactly the same thing, all wanted to read the same books, I mean, it would be boring.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great stuff. Oh my gosh. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about how do you generate new ideas? And for the person who's listening, if they're thinking, where do I even start? What are your thoughts on that? What do you want to share?
I think, again, that you start with what sort of speaks to you. So the first thing that I wrote that I referred to earlier came out of my own personal experience. Everything was made up, but it was about something that was emotionally connected to me. So I think that rather than trying to think of what's the best idea, you figure out kind of what's speaking to you. What do you like? And it's funny because after I wrote my first thing, I probably went like at least a year before I wrote a second thing, because I felt like, oh, all right, I already did nothing else to say. Where's an idea going to come from? And what I learned is that your imagination is like a muscle. If you don't exercise it, it can't work for you. So I started cutting out newspaper articles, looking at magazines, looking at people's lives. What's interesting to me? So I think you kind of first tap into who or what would you like to spend the next year or whatever it takes you with. What would be fun for you? What is that subject? Or maybe you start with a character, or maybe you see a newspaper article and something, rings a bell. So I think you've got to be open to whatever, and also trust your instincts. I mean, there's no right or wrong subjects. I've seen books that have won an award, and even if they sound interesting, it's just something I'm not interested in, which is fine. So you find what speaks to you and how, you want to spend a long time in that world. And that's what, sort of the genesis, I think, of every idea.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Scouting out newspaper articles, looking through magazines and stuff, kind of being inspired, even just like your everyday life when you're out and about,
Absolutely.
right? Yeah,
I
great.
gave an assignment to my USC students. It was before Thanksgiving, and they all come up with kind of horror or superhero stuff. And I'm trying to teach them to do more personal kind of things, smaller things, things that we can relate to, but, really examining characters. And it was before Thanksgiving, and kids were going home. And I said to them, why don't you do something different this Thanksgiving? Sit down with people in your family and talk to them, ask them questions, really dig into who they are. And one of the students came back after the holiday and he was so excited because he talked to his uncle, and the uncle told him about Vietnam and people being drafted and all of this stuff that he knew nothing about. Nobody teaches you these things. So he was fascinated by it. And he ended up writing a film that he actually raised money for and got produced on his own, all about two friends who one did really well in school and was going on to college, and his best friend was kind of a kid that really hadn't found himself yet and got drafted and had to go to Vietnam. And it was all about the last day they spent together. And it was wonderful. This is a kid that knew nothing until he talked to people. And then this sort of sparked something in him about friendship and what happens when one person goes in a very different, in a scary direction. You don't know if you ever see them again. So out of life, if you feel like, again, what's speaking to you, it doesn't have to be a literal interpretation of it. It's like you grabbed onto this little kernel and now you start to build out from there. So there are really ideas everywhere once you sort of get in the mindset of that, rather than expecting, some bolt of lightning to hit you. And, it's really about you cultivating your imagination.
Yeah. And something that you shared in there about just talking to people in your family, it's sort of like getting back to basics a little bit. And it made me think of, I remember Mama, the story. She was trying to become a writer, thinking like, I
Right.
have to have this grand idea. And really it boiled down to a story of the stories about her mother. And, it's like the real life, the real thing, the tangible stuff that people can really connect with instead of that, some grand idea. And
Right.
so great point. Yeah.
I had seen recently a movie, very small independent film that was it was a story about a woman who, during World War II, they asked British citizens to write letters to soldiers. I mean, you didn't have to know them, but just write sort of a letter to tell them what was happening back in England. What were people doing? What did it feel like to be there now? All those kind of things. And this one woman who had nothing in her life decided to do that, and how it changed her. I mean, here's a story. They made a movie about that. You think you can make a movie about someone writing letters to someone they never knew? How is that interesting? But it was, because what's interesting about stories are the characters. I mean, we sometimes think it's not. Stories are character driven. They're not plot driven. It goes back to that same example, what we were talking about a few minutes ago, about the airplane crashing in and everybody. That's the whole thing. What makes us unique is the way each of us experiences things. So it's really embracing that idea, in that that's the thing that gives you both comfort and motivation.
Good stuff, Bonnie. I love it. Thank you so much.
Sure.
So let me ask you, if I'm not a writer and I'm not a published writer, I write in a journal, my daily stuff and whatever, and ideas from my past and whatnot. But if the person's listening is like, I'm not a writer either, but I've kind of thought about it, would the storytelling lab that you offer, would that be something that would be good for them? They've never written anything before. I've
Right.
never written anything before. Would it be something that would be beneficial?
That was the whole point of the class. That's why I didn't want to call it a writing class, because writing class comes with so many expectations. And I really don't want people to have expectations. I want people to explore. and find out exactly what they want to say and how they want to say it and what makes them feel really comfortable and truthful to themselves. And someone said to me, well, why is the class only 6 weeks? Why isn't it longer? And I said, because what I'm trying to do with people, I honestly think you could do in 6 weeks, because it's like opening the vault is really what it is. And giving you permission, and also how comfortable being with your own words. Because initially everybody, like the first week, are just mortified. You've never even heard your own voice reading something, let alone writing something. And it's such a shock when you do. And then after that, people get so comfortable, and you realize, even though people, let's say, saw the same movie and then they had a prompt that was something about it, it's like they didn't, because they're bringing themselves to it. And it underscores that point of what you have to say is important. And we want to hear from you because we've never heard from you before. So that's the whole point of my class, is really I always call it a class to eliminate your fear, to make you feel empowered, to make you feel like, of course I can do this. And I really hear people all the time in the letters I get from people they're amazed that they could have stepped out of their comfort zone, because with the right kind of encouragement and in a space, I think, where you feel safe, that you can begin to do those kind of things. And you find out things about yourself that you never knew. And I've seen it with so many people. And it's not just writing. I had recently had a guy, and I have very few men. It's mainly women, because I think that women are more apt to want to explore themselves, their inner life. But this was a guy, and he was wonderful. And he lived in Mexico. He was British, but he moved there with his lover. And they had been together in there a long time. And he wrote me this wonderful letter after the class to say how inspiring it was and how much he enjoyed it. And he said, and it gave him the confidence to apply he always wanted to be an architect and thought he could never do it, and now had applied to architecture school. I thought, this is the whole point. It's finding yourself and what really connects with you. And we don't get to do that. Even if you'll take a writing class, it's going to be like I took a playwriting class. So it was very specific. This is not as specific, because I'm trying to get you to find what way you want to communicate. Somebody else wrote a song. Somebody else has been she wanted to write a memoir. A lot of people want to write memoirs. And now what she's doing instead, she's been doing these 10-minute kind of spoken word things where she'll just storytelling on stage. And she's now done 3 or 4 of them. It's finding what works for you. I think that we all go into a class, particularly like, I'm going to be a writer, or I'm going to do it this way. But in the same way, I started out playwriting, and I ended up finding out, no, I'm more comfortable doing writing for television and movie. So you don't know something that you don't know. We expect to know something about something we never did. I mean, that's crazy. So this is how you find out what it is you really want to do, as opposed to what you think you want to do.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Bonnie. And it's kind of made me think of sort of soul expanding. Anytime you're really stepping out and doing something different, it's to me, it feels soul expanding, right? I mean, you're just,
Absolutely.
yeah, you're launching yourself in some new way that you never thought possible
Right.
before. So I love that idea.
It's very empowering,
Yeah.
because I think that we think of ourselves in sort of very narrow ways. And there's something that's when you sort of start to expand that vision, you just feel like such a richer, fuller, more accomplished person. And let's be honest, it's all about you, right? It's all about you, how we make ourselves feel.
Yeah, good stuff. Oh gosh. Okay, so let me ask you at this point, if there's anything that you haven't shared that you feel like the person who's listening really needs to know, what would you like to say?
Well, I feel sort of like I've said it, which is get out of your comfort zone. I mean, your comfort zone really is going to kill you. And you're going to look back. I really believe this. One day you're going to go, why didn't I do this? Why did I devote my whole stuff to my work or whatever? No, you have to make space for yourself. Go, as I say, take any class. Take my class, take a dancing class, an art class. It doesn't matter. It's really about breaking the inertia, getting you out of, I can only do this or I shouldn't do this. Just do it. I mean, what have you got to lose other than spend some money on the course? But you're never going to look back 10 years and go, I'm sorry I took that class. No, it's never going to happen. So there's just simply no downside.
Yeah. No downside to trying something new.
It's very empowering. It really is. I mean, now I don't approach things in the same way. I'm much more open to, what the hell? Who cares? I'll try it.
Yes, I love that. Absolutely empowering. Good stuff. Okay, you've shared a couple of books through the podcast, but I always love to have my guests share if there's any books or podcasts that they enjoy listening to that they have read or they feel like has really been beneficial or influential. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the listeners?
I read something, sadly, I can't remember who did it, but you can look it up on the internet. There was something, and I use it in my class, which is something called ambiguous loss. And there's been actually a book and an article that appeared in the New Yorker that sort of started the whole thing. And it's all about, we all have this need, and we talk about it in our culture, about closure. Everything's about closure. But this whole book is about how loss is ambiguous, as she calls it, and that you really can't get closure on things. What does it really mean to get closure? And how living with the truth, as opposed to living with these fantasies of what we expect of ourselves, makes death and separation and all the things that are the most hard to deal with, and that we feel we need, quote unquote, closure on, and understanding about what does that really mean. It was one of the few things that I don't tend, as I said earlier, to read not fiction. I tend to be a fiction reader. I just finished a really funny book called How to Kill Your Family. What a great title. I mean, it's a really great title. And it was so funny and so clever. Yeah. So I have a whole book list. As a matter of fact, if people sign my mailing list, to go to my storytellinglab.online, when you sign my mailing list, it will send you a list of my favorite movies, my favorite TV things, and my favorite books.
Oh, perfect. I'll for sure include the details in the show notes for the
Right.
listeners to find. Yeah. So are there any podcasts that you enjoy listening to that you want to share?
I have to say, honestly, I don't listen to that many podcasts because, when I listen to them, when I go on a trip. And lately I've started, actually, for the very first time, and now I'm going to move on to podcasts, is I started listening to books on tape when I go for a walk. And one of the things I thought, well, now that I've kind of gotten used to that, the next thing I'm going to go to is podcasts.
Yeah. And you're right. A lot of people do choose to listen to podcasts while they're walking or on their commute to work or, something like that. So thank you for sharing that. And listening to audiobooks is a fabulous way to, gain that knowledge and just learning something new while you're doing something, boring like commuting.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very funny because I'm a big reader, and I found it's like doubling my reading because I read when I'm just proper reading, and then I get to listen to this. So I'm finding like I'm really getting through so much more things.
Yeah, love it. Okay, that's awesome. But Bonnie, before we close out, would you share with the listeners how they can follow along with the work that you're doing? If they want to reach out to you and see about the Storytelling Lab, how would they do that? Are you on social media?
Yes, I am on social media, of course. On Instagram, it's story.tellinglab. And everywhere else, it's Storytelling Lab. And my website, which is storytellinglab.online. And the other thing I have there is testimonials from students who have taken the class so that you can see how other people feel about it and what it's done for them. And to follow me and do all those other kind of good things. But I really encourage people to, look into the class because it is so different. One of the things I love about it is nobody is doing this because I'm really taking a multiple disciplinary kind of approach as opposed to doing one thing. So I also think it makes it a lot more fun because you really have the freedom to just explore things because there is no expectation on you. And I love to have the freedom of not having expectations. Because I have such high expectations, is really, really liberating. And once again, it's also empowering because it allows you to be you and embrace that in a way that we tend not to do with ourselves.
Excellent. That's fantastic. I love that. Thank you for sharing. And again, I'll
Sure.
include all the details in the show
Right.
notes so listeners can find you easily. Bonnie, this has been so great. I've so enjoyed our conversation. Thank you again for joining us
My
today.
pleasure. My
Yeah,
pleasure. I like being a guest on your show. Thank you for having me.
yeah, excellent. Well, thank you again, and we'll talk more soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. We appreciate your time and curiosity as we explore fascinating topics together. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to join us next week for another amazing episode. Remember, your journey of learning and growth is a continuous adventure, and we're thrilled to be part of it. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next week, stay curious and keep exploring those pockets of knowledge.